Today we're here to talk about a very overlooked scientist, Alfred Russel Wallace. And while you may know the theory of evolution, you may associate that name with Charles Darwin. However, Alfred Russel Wallace was the true father of the theory of evolution. Alfred Russel Wallace worked before Charles Darwin in the creation of the theory of evolution. Even though Darwin claims most of the credit for this incredible discovery, Alfred Russel Wallace was the mastermind behind it all. Wallace's journeys, discoveries, and curious minds led to a worldwide theory that we still learn about and use to this day, the theory of evolution. Alfred Russel Wallace was born on January 8, 1823 in Usk, Monmouthshire, Wales. In his early years, Wallace worked at his brother's surveying firm until he became a teacher in the year 1844. During Wallace's time as a teacher, he became closely acquainted with a man named Henry Walter Bates. Bates was a naturalist, which was a common interest between him and Wallace. Bates also enjoyed collecting beetles in his free time. The interest Bates had in collecting beetles quickly turned into a conversation about him and Wallace traveling to the Amazon together to try to discover new species of beetles. The reason the two wanted to go to the Amazon was because of recent stories they had heard about the New World.
After the discussion of traveling to the Amazon, there was just one question. How would they afford this? In order to gain enough money to go on their trip, the two collected and sold a variety of insects. During their time in the Amazon, Bates and Wallace decided to split up, which led to Wallace discovering a variety of new species on his own. While Wallace did discover some new species of beetles, his main discoveries were unique species of birds and butterflies. Once Wallace had finished his research in the Amazon, he took a ship back to England, while also bringing all his collected species along with him. Tragically, the ship set on fire in the middle of the sea, and although Wallace and other crew members survived, his species sank to the bottom of the ocean. Wallace wasn't upset about his losses, though. The fire gave him more motivation to explore. Wallace was quick to go on another expedition, this time traveling to Malay Archipelago, which is known as Malaysia and Indonesia. Wallace spent 8 years researching in this place.
Throughout the 8 years that Wallace was researching, he discovered over 126,550 specimens, with over 5,000 of those species being new to Western science. Another thing that Wallace discovered was that animal species between the Malay Archipelago and Australia seemed to greatly differ. Wallace drew an imaginary line through where he determined was the line that split the territory and different species. This imaginary line became known as Wallace's Line. After this discovery, Wallace traveled to a small island named Ternate, which is now also known as Indonesia, where he finally grasped the idea of how species evolved. Wallace determined that the fittest of each population would reproduce and pass down their unique characteristics to each generation. This new understanding became what we now know as the theory of evolution.
After Wallace had created an understanding of evolution, he decided to share his knowledge with someone else he knew was researching the same topic, Charles Darwin. Darwin eventually outshined Wallace with a new understanding of evolution, and Wallace was evidently forgotten about. Even though Wallace was really the founder of this idea when Darwin was more acknowledged for the theory, Wallace wasn't resentful. Instead, he was proud of Darwin as well as his own contribution to science. Even though Wallace has gotten some spotlight now for his contribution in the evolution theory, it wasn't the only thing he did. Wallace contributed a lot of knowledge and research to zoology throughout his time in the Amazon and Malay Archipelago. While spending time in the Malay Archipelago, he also wrote a book called The Malay Archipelago, which provided insight to the beauty and differences in nature throughout different countries. He also founded the field of biogeography, which is the study of how species of plants and animals vary across the world. However, Wallace wasn't just a biologist, he was an activist. Wallace contributed to the fight for better wages, poverty, imperialism, as well as fighting for a more stable government.